All right, we just went live. Tech Talk Tuesday. Thanks everybody for being here. Different time and different place, as you can see. I am at home. We're not at the shop. Mike won't be with us because it is a little bit later. Yeah, yesterday I was pretty down and out. Well, just prepping for a procedure that I had today at the hospital, so I kind of didn't go into work today, so that's why I'm at home and Mike's not with us. But everything's okay as far as that goes. We're just different time, and I was still able to make this work. So thanks everyone for being here. This is a time we like to take out of our week to kind of answer some questions because we do get so many texts and emails and phone calls. So everybody that I've been getting texts and emails from, I know I'm way behind. Like I'll answer a question and then I just quite haven't got back to you because I've been so busy. So I apologize for that. It's not, I'm not ignoring you, I promise. It's just that I just got so much going on, and I've been really sick for the last day or so. So anyways, enough about that. We'll get right into the questions, but first I would like to thank everybody. You know, I put out that video on our software and stuff, and thanks Dan, I see you're here, and Phone Echo for throwing out a couple shout outs, because y'all were kind of my first people who bought those and kind of the beta programs, and it seemed like it was working for everybody. So we made some adjustments and stuff, and went ahead and did a video on that because I thought I had enough in stock. I didn't know the demand was going to be where it was, but our systems are working really good. Got all the software up and going, and within like 3 hours of putting that video up, I completely sold out of all my laptops, all my interfaces. I mean, everything was gone within 3 hours. So unfortunately I had to pause that for a couple weeks until I got enough equipment back in stock and programmed and ready to go. The biggest question I've been asked so far from everybody is, can they just buy the software and upload it to their own laptop without buying the laptop? And yes, you can absolutely do that. We can remotely install the software for you via TeamViewer and get you up to date. We might have to change a couple settings once you get your interfaces, but you'll have to have the interfaces, of course, if you're going to talk to the machines either way. You might already have the interfaces, you just need the software, whatever the case may be. Yes, we can do that. If you were to buy all the software individually, it doesn't really save you hardly any money than just getting a whole nother laptop. But I understand you don't want a bunch of laptops, you know, floating around. So you know, when we do a remote install, it takes time, so it just costs a little bit more for the software, and the computers really aren't that expensive. It's the software you're paying for when you look at the price of a laptop. So enough about that. Thanks everybody for buying that. Number one, thanks for being here. Thanks for all the support on the channel. I really appreciate that. So we'll jump right into it. Texan first says, we'll just start right at the top. I have an S175 skid steer, have some tilt cylinder drift. He performed a bypass testing of the cylinder as part of the service manual and found a bad tilt cylinder. I'll have to rebuild one cylinder. I remember having trouble with one of the new seals that I stretched a little too far. Any tips to make this mistake, to not make this mistake again? Could you go over any other parts that might cause tilt cylinder drift? And you also want to know if parts are good from all skid steers. So, yeah, going straight into, yeah, sometimes you just stretch the seals too far. So on our website at 4tetradgroup.com, and you can email me too, and I can send you a link to that. We've got a seal stretcher. So it's a stretcher that allows you to slowly stretch them perfectly round. And then we've got what's called a clasper, because even if you do stretch that seal too far or too big around your for the piston, we've got a clasper. I mean, either way, you've got to shrink that seal back down, right? Well, our clasper has a metal band in it, and it works really good. It's kind of like I used to use a piston ring compressor, but it just didn't quite work as good. Man, our clasper has a real thin stainless band, and it really clasps and shrinks that seal down perfectly round. I mean, it works really good. So it's two different parts, a stretcher and a clasper. You don't have to have the stretcher. You can still stretch it by hand, and the clasper will still bring it down. But when you stretch it by hand or whatever, sometimes it's not perfectly round. And just, you know, if you really want to get the right tools, get a stretcher and a clasper, and both of those are on our website. They work really good. Part small skid steers, it's kind of hit or miss. I say that, I mean, I've used them for stuff, like I buy mufflers from them, coolant overflow bottles, and I've bought plenty of stuff from them. One thing that I don't usually buy aftermarket is seal kits, and maybe that's where you were going with that question. I've had too many issues with seal kits. I prefer to get them straight from Bobcat because you get the right part number and you get the right kit every time. Sometimes, like all skid steers, or I'm not calling out all skid steers, but some of these aftermarket parts places, you kind of get, it's like one seal kit that might work for multiple machines and they either don't fit right, or I've just had too many issues buying online trying to save a few dollars. So as far as cylinder seal kits, I recommend Bobcat. But other parts from all skid steers, other than electrical stuff, I can't even say that. I've had good luck with them. I mean, some people bash it, and maybe someone else has had more experience with them. But I've bought like rear tail light kits from them. Like I said, mufflers, coolant bottles. I think I bought radiator from them. So yeah, I've used them, and I've good service. Parts get shipped really quick. I have no complaints. And their cylinder seal kits are probably good, but I just had, you buy it from Bobcat, you're only gonna have to do it once. Well, let's just put it that way. And Nickel, like I said, is here. Our California friend, another great technician, and he's right. It could be a loose, piston nut on the cylinder rod. There's quite a few other things that could cause that, but since tilt cylinder drift, it's usually either a cylinder, a port relief in the control valve, maybe a non-centered spool. That's just kind of the three simple things that could cause that. And like he said, a loose nut or a bolt on the piston can also cause that. But that's pretty much the three places. You always start with the cylinders, and in worst case, then you look at a port relief. And make sure that your spool is centered. And then you want to know, is it tilting with the machine turned off versus turned on? Because that's kind of two different symptoms we would look at. So if your machine was on and running, your BIC's unlocked, and if your bucket's tilting down, but if you raise the lap bar and then it stops drifting down, we would be looking at different issues. So that's a couple things to ask. Oh, and faux nickel, that's kind of what we were talking about, using a piston ring compressor to squeeze those seals. And that's what I used to use. Seal stretcher and clasper. Dude, you're like way ahead of me, man. You guys were here before me, and I feel like I'm behind. So appreciate the input, man. That means a lot, because I try to go through these questions really fast, but the guys in the comments will kind of jump in there and they'll make suggestions that I either forget or overlook or just don't even know, man. It works out really good. So thanks, everybody. So feel free to jump in the comments and help me out. When you see a question, that helps out a lot. Let's see. William, let's see. I have a T62R series. When I turn the power on, the right-hand display is blank. Mainframe harnessed. What kind of test can I do to condemn the mainframe harness? It looks like Dan already had a couple suggestions for you there. So what year model is that? Because when these things kind of first started coming out, we had software issues where they would go blank, and we need to do a software update on that screen, more than likely. That's kind of the first thing I would check. To see if we can do a software update. And our software, if you bought it from us, you can update that panel. It's kind of a two-step process, because we have to use and do you have a 7-inch or the 5-inch? Do you have the touch screen, or do you have the non-touch screen? Because it was the non-touch screen that we had to update. So I'm just assuming that's the one you have. But you'll have to upload the update into a USB drive, and then you take the USB drive, you have to pull the panel out, and you'll see the USB plug back there behind the panel for the 5-inch. The 7-inch, the USB is in a different spot. But that's just based off experience. That's kind of where I'm going to be leaning toward. Is a software update. If it's a newer machine, then like Dan said, you're going to start going through checking all your fuses and stuff, and then what you'll do is check the connections on your controllers. So you'll want to check the connection on so you'll raise the cab up, and right underneath the cab, kind of where the seat is, you'll see your cab controller. Unplug those, blow those connections out real good, make sure there's no moisture or water, and sometimes you can't even see the moisture in there. You just want to use some compressed air and blow those fittings out real good, just to make sure that there is no water or anything in there. and then plug it back in. And then the other place you'd check is if you're kind of crawl in the front of the machine and you kind of look down on your left, you'll see your there'll be a drive in the hub controller. The hub controller is kind of a bluish, purplish color, I guess. Got 2 plugs on the bottom of it. You'd want to unplug those and just blow those out. So do those first, and then we might be looking at a software update, because those screens would kind of black out. So they would either get stuck in the on position or they'd black out and they wouldn't turn on. So it's that's kind of where I would start. I would start with ECU connections and then probably start looking at maybe an update on that panel depending on what year it is. So not to beat that to death. Moving right along. Mac has some codes on his T190, D7517 and D7518. After converting to AW46, so he changed out his hydraulic oil from what was in it, maybe engine oil or I don't know, to an AW46. Not sure if that is the issue. Harness looks good. If it were just one side, I would think bushing, but both swash plates. I'm assuming there's a question mark after that. So codes D7517 and D7518, that's both left and right swash plate out of neutral. I can't imagine changing over the hydraulic oil would cause that, being that they're both out of neutral. And again, this, like, I try to do as much as I can as far as trying to help without software. But this might be one of those situations where we need to hook it up and see where those swash plates are. See if they're both out of the forward position or both out of the reverse position, or one's forward, one's reverse, and just see kind of what's going on the computer. I've seen everything from a bad controller to, yeah, pump's actually going bad. If one side starts to go out, it kind of takes out the other side, and then you can have issues. And I think, let's see, Matt cares. Yeah, phonic. See, you guys are way ahead of me, man, and he's right. You want to take a look at that hydraulic oil and see if you have any brass in your filters. Let's see, that's a T190. So yeah, you got the spin-on filters. So you would just spin them off and dump them out in a clean container. And you know, like I always say, you'll have a little bit of brass, a little bit of color in there, but if it's excessive or it looks like a gold tint or a hue, like streaming through the oil when you shine a light on it, then you're probably losing pumps. So, you know, without software, it's kind of hard for me to answer that one. I mean, if you've already checked all the plugs, the connections, and the wiring and all that stuff, we'd almost have to hook it up to one of our computers and kind of go from there. William had another question on the G series loaders. What's the voltage specification to the Bix coil? 7.5 volts. No, the Bix coil is a 12 volt coil. So I'm not sure whether 7.5 or maybe that's what you have. And if you have a voltage drop going to a Bix coil or something like that, it's usually coming from the controller. I mean, you'll want to load test or load test continuity. No, not kind of ohm out maybe, or whatever you want to. You can ohm the wire or load test the wire all the way back to the controller, but you have to check it all the way back to the controller where it plugs into the controller. And another thing you can do is unplug the coil, back probe the controller, unlock the brake, and see if you get 12 volts at the controller without the coil plugged in. You might get a code though. I think, yeah, because if it's unplugged, it'll be out of range. So that method might not work. But you could still leave the coil plugged up, back probe at the controller, and see if you've got 12 volts coming out of the controller. But if you don't, like I said, it's either a voltage drop to the coil or the controller itself's bad. You should have 12 volts on the Bix. Dan was helping out. Let's see. Thanks for being here again, Dan. Is 6 o'clock a little bit better for y'all? I hope so. It seemed like 4 o'clock we're still working. It seems like everyone else is still at work. And this is 6 o'clock Mountain Time, 8 o'clock Eastern Time. So the East Coast might be getting ready for bed if you're old like me. 8 o'clock's getting close to bedtime. Let's see. Yeah, you guys are just answering everything for me. Where am I at? Mike, are you still here? This is where I get lost, man. I slide this little slider and I completely lose track of where I was at. Mike is really good at keeping up with where I am. Good Lord, guys, I hit this slider. There's a lot of questions here. I better speed up. Sorry. Hopefully I'll get to your stuff pretty quick. Dang, see, Dan, you're way ahead of me. Guys, what am I even doing here? yeah, 12 volts G-Series T190. I think all the G-Series are 12 volts, so. No, Mike. Yeah, it looks like Mike joined us late. He's not on live with us because we're at home. I should have just called him and had him on the phone or do one of those. I'm going to have to set this up with him. But yeah, let me know if 6 o'clock is working better. I'll eventually get down to that. Okay. Let's see. High-Tech Redneck, appreciate your help yesterday and sorry for bothering you while you weren't feeling well. Nope, you're never bothering me. Hopefully I was able to help you out. I do remember talking to you, but I was kind of out of it yesterday, so I don't remember exactly what our issue was, but glad. Hopefully we got you helped out, or maybe we're still working on the issue. Like I said, I got to go through my texts and my emails and get caught up. I mean, I know people are waiting on me, and I feel bad that I can't quite get to everything because just so much going on. But okay, let's see. First Fast Sleeper, looking to replace my open cab T595. What's your opinion on the T595 versus T6466? Pros and cons of each, ease of maintenance or repair, common issues with any particular model. And so that's a hard one for me because I am such a fan of the T595, but the T64, T66, the R series are getting a lot better. You know, when they first came out, we had our bugs and issues. It looks like Bobcat's worked through a lot of those bugs and issues, and now the machines are really good. We do have a T595 M series that you can get that has the Bosch fuel injection system on it. So that might be a good option. Those are still for sale. I really like the new R series. Because of the enclosed cab, they're so quiet, they're smooth, the weight and balance. Some people kind of complain about the weight and balance, but Bobcat kind of repositioned the balance on those machines to work better, in better conditions, be smoother, and just the way they lift. So 64, 66, so 64, you know, you're not a high lift, you're more of a radial lift. The 66 a high lift. I mean, if you're loading dump trucks and stuff, you probably want the 66. If you're just doing earthwork or whatever, you're not really loading about dumping really high, maybe the T64 is going to be fine. So either one of those are going to be fine. T66, you got more moving linkage and stuff to it. So maybe, yeah, it just depends on your needs as far as that goes, because they're very close machines, just one's radial, one's high lift. So that's kind of a hard one for me, because like I said, the M3 series on the 595, I might lean toward that. I don't know, but I'm not an operator. I just work on them. And as far as maintenance goes, I like the 595. I mean, the R series aren't bad either. Man, you put me in a tough position here to answer these questions. Y'all done looking at the Rogue X back there? Check this out. This is one I did last year. Guy flipped it over. But no, there's not really any. The T595 is a proven machine. It's been out for a long time. A lot of good things with that one. So I don't know of really any real issues now that we've kind of worked through. If you're looking at like a 2020 or 2021 used R series, then you might have some issues. But if you're looking brand new, both, I don't think you're going to have any issues with either one, man. It's going to be almost personal preference on that. Sorry, I wish I had a little more information for you. Let's see. Max says he checked filter, just minimal metallic swirl in the sunshine. I've seen worse in my 250. Did not think that was the issue. Yeah, probably not. Like I said, you're always going to have some little metallic shine in there. So if you're not seeing chunks or just like a river of gold, you're probably fine, man. So yeah, you know, connections and other than hooking it up to our software and seeing where those swash plates are, what they're doing, why they're not centering, and what the computer thinks, it could just be a controller issue, because I've seen that too when you get both left and right. Let's see, Garrett's got a 2009 T320 with spring suspension. Oh, I'm sorry. Is it possible to swap track frames from spring to solid? I think it's possible. Is it cost effective? I'm not sure. I'm kind of on the spot here, but I think that someone had a kit or a way to swap that over to solid without swapping the whole track frame. And I'm just going to have to look back on that and see, because the T320 is a little bit older. It's probably a G, or probably a 2009, so probably a K series. But it seems like on the M series there was a conversion kit to take all those springs out, because those springs break so often. So you can swap the track frames, yes. Like I said, cost effective, I don't know. But I'm going to have to look into that conversion kit to change it over from spring to a solid roller on those. High-tech redneck, we have a 2005 Bobcat A300 that it's stuck in forward. Will not go in neutral or reverse regardless of where the joystick is. What could cause this? So A300 all-wheel steer machine is going to be an SJC, so you have controllers on those pumps. Again, I would almost have to see if they're both sucking forward. I need to see where the joysticks are, and you know, the position of the joysticks and the position of the swash plates. Why? So both sides are going forward, I'm assuming. What it's kind of odd that both sides would be stuck in forward. It's usually one side or the other. If you have a controller issue on top of your pump, or one of your coils or something is bad. And I'd almost have to see that serial number to see exactly which pump is in there. Because I'm not 100% sure just off the top of my head exactly which hydrostatic pump is in there. And we can get back together. I know you said we've talked before. I'll have to look back into that and see why both sides would be doing that. Anybody else have anything? Mike Doherty says, where's Mike? Mike is here. I hope you're still in the comments, man. Let's see. Why are they both stuck in forward? I'd ponder this, but it looks like I'm so far behind, I might have to move along. But again, this is where our software comes into play. I hate to keep, it's not that I'm pushing it, it's just sometimes we have to have it. Sometimes we have to see what these controllers are doing, where your joystick, make sure your joystick, X, Y, axis are in center. Can you swap it from your patterns, and does it still do the same thing? So I don't know if this is electrical or mechanical without, you know, hooking it up and seeing. Looks like we got someone from Ecuador. Man, I like that. We always get someone, it seems like, from overseas or other countries. I really like that. Thanks for joining us from Ecuador. Dan answered, let's see, first fast sleeper M3 series, T595 is a great machine. R series is good as well, but I would recommend that T595. Yeah, me and Dan are on the same page, man. It's just like, I like the comfort and how quiet the R series is, but it's just hard to beat the proven T595 for sure. Oh yeah, Dan and I, we just talked about that, the Bosch system on the M3 series. When they first came out, they had the M3 series, and there was some models that came out that still had the Delphi, but it's all changed over to the Bosch now. And the Bosch injection systems are like, I don't want to, I can almost say superior to the Delphi systems, but I think it was really a filtration issue on the Delphi systems. They were more sensitive, but now we got an incredible filtration. We got pre-filter, and we got a big filter with a water separator on it on the new M3 series, with an actual pressurized lift pump. So just the whole pre-fuel system getting to the high pressure pump is better than what it was on the M and M2 series with the Delphi system. So Tony has a S650 that won't start, got new injectors, new rail pressure, oh, new pump, crank, and cam sensors, still will not start, thanks. So why, I mean, I'm assuming, why, do we have any codes? Do you have any rail pressure codes? What's, like, why did it just, there's a few questions I'd have to ask, you know what I mean? Why did it just stop at some point? Did you go out there one day and it just wouldn't start? Did you remove your drive belt? Make sure we don't have a hydrostatic load on the system. Like if your Bobcat valve or something gets stuck, we could have a hydrostatic load on there. And it doesn't take much of a hydrostatic load. The engine will not start. So when you're trying to start this machine with all the new injectors and a new high pressure rail, a new pump, take that main drive belt off, and that's going to give you a little more RPM, and it's going to allow. It's just going to rule out a hydrostatic load. That's the first thing we do with the no start, is rule out a hydrostatic load. And then what we do is, as you're cranking the engine, sometimes depending on where you got your injectors, especially if they're aftermarket, sometimes they're just stuck right out of the box, and we have to get them freed up. So what you can do is, you're cranking the engine over, you unplug the rail sensor, and these are in some of my videos, I go over this, and when you unplug that rail sensor, that commands, or it allows the IMV to go wide open, and it allows the system to build maximum pressure, and that thing will build 28,000 to 30,000 PSI, and that'll kind of hammer on those injectors and get them freed up. So as you're cranking, you'll unplug the rail sensor, and you'll kind of hear a small load, or you should hear a small load on the engine because we're building so much pressure, and then plug that sensor back in as you're turning it over, and sometimes that'll get things moving again. And sometimes you might have to do that 10, 20 times before they all get freed up and running again. But first, pull your drive belt off, and then try that little trick with the high pressure sensor. Just unplug it as you're going there. And I'm sure a lot of people can add other things to what I'm saying here to check out. And then worst case scenario, we got to make sure those injectors are firing. So sometimes what we'll do is we'll pull the injectors out. You can literally flip them upside down. You'll have to kind of unhook your wiring harness and pull it around, but you can flip those injectors upside down so they're facing up into the atmosphere, plug them back in, turn the engine over, and see if they're actually firing. That's another trick we use to make sure that the injectors are firing. And again, then once all that, then we kind of need the software and see what's going on. But software doesn't always help. We talked about that bad crankshaft that Mike and I had fairly recently, that it turned out to be, a bad crankshaft, but the software didn't really help us at all because everything was checking out. But if we had software on there, just because you put new cam and crank sensors in there, doesn't mean we're getting a good reading out of those cam and crank sensors. And so yeah. There's a few things to check, and also check fuse number 21 as a 15 amp fuse. Just make sure that you don't have any issues with that crossover harness, because you'll actually lose. The cam sensor is 12 volts, and it shares the same 12 volts circuit as the IMV, but you'd kind of get codes for that, but you do want to just go ahead and check for that fuse number 21, 15 amp. So hopefully that gives you a direction to go in. If you still have issues, we can set up a time. You can schedule an appointment with us on our website, and we can do an online call, and we can do a video call, and we can get on and see if we can troubleshoot that thing for you. Mac Harris, slightly binding tilt cylinder after a seized gland nut. Had to get it hot with acetylene to break free. I did notice it is glazing the rod. Maybe I should replace the entire cylinder. Yeah, I mean, I don't know, I see people run all the time with bent cylinders. Slightly binding. Okay, yeah, if you're binding, you're probably metal to metal, and you're going to damage your seals first, and then you're going to start scratching the inside of the barrel, and then it's possible that metal is going to get into your hydraulic system, get into your control valve or stuff. So yeah, sometimes we have it. The other day we had a rod that we could not get apart. We had to replace the rod. Mike did everything he could to get that nut off, couldn't get it off. We even heated it, and it was still seized. So we ended up replacing the whole rod. It just wasn't worth it at that point. We had more labor in it than what the rod cost. So yeah, either replace the rod or the entire cylinder. I mean, just inspect the barrel. If you already got any scratching or scarring inside that barrel, then yeah, you'd want to go ahead and replace the whole thing. I don't know. It says, can I send CAD drawings of the equipment? I don't understand English, so blink if you read my message. Okay, I'll blink, I guess. I don't understand what you mean by CAD drawings of what equipment. Yeah, I don't know. No, Mike's not a part-timer. He's Mike actually really came through the last few days for me while I'm getting all this stuff fixed up on my side. So I would be more of a part-timer than Mike. But I still do enjoy Tech Talk Tuesday. This is easy. Working and going out on them service calls. And dude, Mike went out. I just can't say enough good things about him, man, because it doesn't matter what the issue is. He's more than willing to just go out there and do it. And I'm so damn proud of him, especially on this. I sent him up to a silver mine up in Park City, way up in the mountains, to work on a Genie. I just kind of threw him in the middle of it, a big Genie telehandler, and that had electrical issues, man. And this, it's a hard problem. No forward reverse, and it was a very hard problem to troubleshoot. But Mike, we haven't quite fixed it yet, but he narrowed it down and at least got the machine driving. And he drove that thing at least 6 miles off the mountain, if I'm not mistaken, to get it down. And that was a late night for him. So just the stuff, he's just always willing to jump in and try the hard stuff. And that's what I always tell you. Well, I don't know everything, you know, but that's the best way to learn, is just jump in there and figure it out on these things, you know. I didn't know what to tell him or what direction. He took it upon himself to find his own schematics, trace down all the circuits, figure out all the relays, and he's able to bypass some relays and get that thing driving, get it off the mountain. I mean, I can't say enough about how, just how awesome of a job he does, and I'm so lucky to have him. Let's see, yeah, there you go. At least I showed up to the shop today. I don't know if that's a hit to me, but yeah. Mike even stopped by the house today. He was so busy. But Dan also agrees with the seal kits from Bobcat. You're going to pay a little more. It's always right. You're not going to have to do it twice. So let's see. Max says, I was wondering if that was putting debris in the swash plates, but the filter didn't look bad checking after both swash plates. I mean, it's going to take some heavy debris to keep those swash plates from moving. They got a big servo that pushes them, that uses charge pressure. So unless you've lost charge pressure, well, no, charge pressure doesn't make sense. Wait, oh, you're out of neutral. So yeah, still charge pressure. They should still center themselves. They should spring center themselves, and charge pressure is what actually moves them. So yeah, it would have to be some heavy debris. So yeah, I still don't have a good answer for you on that without putting on the computer. Sorry, that's my only answer there. Yeah, now we're completely sold out of computers, but hopefully by the 30th I'll have all new interfaces and computers back in stock. Number one, Fast Sleeper did a awesome super chat, $20. Man, that means so much to me, guys. I really appreciate that. That's I just really appreciate the support, man. That I mean, I'm not going to cry or anything about it, but it means a lot. Maybe a little tear. I don't know. It just because I enjoy doing this. I really enjoy helping people, and then when y'all give back, it just really means a lot. Really appreciate that. DJS, thank you for your videos. Recently bought a 2016 T590 with fuel issues. Found that it'd start and run after priming, but had to be primed before every start. 1, 2, and 3 injectors have a decent amount of leakage. Clean number 2 in an ultrasonic cleaner. Now it'll start with fairly extended start with no priming, but ultimately eventually need injectors and would you recommend Friday Parts or any other sellers over Bobcat? Let's see, I got to be careful how I answer this, especially if Mike's still listening. Okay, so we usually carry injectors in stock, but I'm completely sold out of all our injectors. Used them all, sold them all. So I haven't got any more in because we carry the original Delphi injectors. But I've got Wild Man. Come here, say hey.
Oh.
He's trying to ask me questions right in the middle of the stream.
I'm from last Tuesday.
From last Tuesday?
Uh-huh.
You did tell him that you would see him next Tuesday, didn't you?
Oh yeah, Tuesday is today.
Yeah, today is Tuesday. So welcome to being here. Look, let's change.
What happened to this machine? Wait.
Let's change that one flipped over.
Oh.
All right, let's change it up. This is one of my favorite pictures of a T76 Platinum. All right, where were we at? All right, let me get back to this. So yes, so Friday Parts, I can say that in a bind we have ordered injectors from Friday Parts, and I don't think we've had any issues, have we, Mike? Mike doesn't like them. Sometimes they're sticky. We talked about sticky injectors just a second ago. We can usually get them freed up and they work just fine. Just make sure wherever you get them from, you do get them programmed. Update those trim files before you run that machine too long. I mean, you can start it and run it, see if it'll start and run, but make sure you get them programmed. So, yeah, it seems like Friday Parts we've kind of had decent luck with since we're out of our injectors. There's some other people, diesel experts, and there's quite a few diesel shops that are selling original Delphi injectors too. So maybe some of the more reputable diesel shops, they also have good injectors. And they're the original Delphi injectors. Bobcat just takes the original Delphi injector, unboxes it, puts it in a Bobcat box, and charges another $600 or $800 for the same injector. So, yeah, I don't mind buying aftermarket injectors as long as it's from a reputable company, and it seems like the Friday Parts, the ones I've bought, are fine. Faux Nickel, I would like to know more about the failure in the SJC style hydrostatic pumps. We were talking about that earlier. I think Faux Nickel has one now. It looks like the hydrostatic pump, probably the slippers are going out. But what I was asking him was if he had 2-speed on it. So on our earlier M series, on our 2-speed motors, we had quite a few failures of hydrostatic pumps, and we call it a catastrophic failure because the pumps literally exploded inside and just sent metal and debris throughout the whole system. So we literally had to replace the drive motors, the hydrostatic pumps, clean out all the lines, pull the cylinders apart, clean the cylinders out, replace the hydraulic tank because they didn't even want us cleaning the hydraulic tank, so they wanted us to replace it. So the whole entire hydraulic system had to be gone through and cleaned out. So what was happening on the 2-speed pumps, our drive motors, the drive motors have a distributor inside of them. The distributor is how the high pressure oil goes into the distributor. That's what pushes the pistons on the cam. Well, we can go through the whole thing, but long story short, there's a distributor inside. And there's also a distributor inside the single speed as well, but it was only the 2-speed distributors that were having the issue. So, and it wasn't Bobcat, these were Rexroth motors. So the manufacturer of the motors, and then Rexroth assembles the motors. They have someone else doing the casting and stuff like that for them, right? So the distributor, when they were casted, they're casted in sand, and then they're machined. All the ports and the surfaces and all are machined. But inside all the ports, some of that casting sand or some of the steel, when it actually casted in there, got stuck inside of those distributors. And I don't know if it was just a quality control issue or what the case was, but over time, that casting sand, and it was like chunks, almost like slag, when you cut with a torch and you get slag off the metal, that's kind of what this is. And they're chunks, and that would get into one of those slippers. And once one slipper failed, they would all fail, and it would shoot to the other side, and it would take out the other side of the pump, like really quick, within minutes. And you can tell your hydraulic oil would get really, really black, and that was like one first thing to check. Then we pull the filter out and dump the hydraulic filter out, and you would see just all kinds of metal and grit and everything else inside the hydraulic filter. So then you knew right away that was a problem. And then he also said, I think, Bo Nickel, what you said was it still had the old style filter in it. See, if y'all remember on the M series, we had hydraulic filters that have been updated. They updated the filter and the cap. So the old style hydraulic filter, they don't even sell them anymore, so you have to get a new filter and a cap. Even if you got these old filters in stock, throw them away, because what was happening is it filters from the inside out, right? So all the debris, the dirty oil would go into the filter, and it filters from the inside out. Well, some genius, I don't know how this passed quality control, engineering, and everything else. In the bottom of the filter, in the canister, is where the relief was. So, filters have to have a relief valve in them, because if the filter gets clogged or the oil's real cold, then a relief has to open up and let that oil bypass. So where does all that metal and debris that filter has been capturing, where does it kind of settle? It settles in the bottom of the filter, right? So then it's real cold, or now your filter's getting clogged up. It opens up that relief valve in the bottom of the filter and lets all that dirty oil and all that debris and everything just pump right back into the system. So that's why we updated those filters and the caps, and so now the reliefs are in the caps on the clean side. So no more issues as far as that goes. So Mike said that he had a bad connection in the cab harness connector that had a blank screen issue. So cab harness connector, wherever that cab harness connector is, was it on a single wire had corroded through inside the connector? So I'm assuming that was right on the cab controller, right? I think that's why we were saying that that's the first thing we check is the connections on that screen, but it could be an update depending on what year it was. So yeah, Mike's dead on with that goes, as far as that goes. Dang, I just did it again. I moved the slider and then I'm completely lost. I just can't do this without you, Mike. Either I'm that far behind or, yeah, I am. Oh my goodness, people, I'm sorry, man. Y'all got so many questions and I'm just rambling on, dude. We've been, all right, let me try to catch up. Let's move along. T77 D34, which head gasket? I don't know. These guys might have answered that. Usually the head gasket you take off. If you look at your head gasket, it should have either the notch or the number on it, A, B, or C, or 1, 2, or 3. So it depends on which one you take off, unless you do any head work or surface the deck or anything. So each gasket, well, the reason we have different gaskets because they're different thicknesses, because the tolerances on these engines are so tight that it's such a minute difference. So really you could get any one of the head gaskets and you're probably going to be just fine. But in a perfect world, we'd want to go back with what was on there. And then if we did, like I said, any head work or deck work, then we want to go with either a thicker gasket to take up for that material that we lost. So hopefully that answered that question. Let's see. Hardell's back. Hey, Mike, Brady. Yep, Mike is he is with us in the chat, but not with us online. We are at home today, and it seems like it's working out pretty good. Again, hopefully, just let me know if this 6 o'clock is working better for you guys. It kind of works better for me. Oh, Hardell said 6 is good for him. Mike's still here. Let's see. The tilt drift happens both on and off. I think we're talking about that tilt cylinder again. Happens on and off. That's kind of weird. So if you redo the cylinders and you still have that issue, then I'd go to the port relief. You could have a bad seal on your port relief. 10 in the morning here from down under. Love your input. So from Australia, it looks like. Awesome, dude. Awesome to have someone else from. So we got Ecuador. We've got, so Ecuador is here. We got Australia. And Hardell is here from Guyana. Man, I got more people from overseas than we have here in the U.S. Let's see. Hey there, Sunbelt Field Tech here. How often do you see broken down Sunbelt machines? Great question. A lot. We got one in our machine now. So we see a lot of them. You know, I mean, Sunbelt, they cycle these machines. They go through a lot of machines, and I think they have a pretty good maintenance program there. I mean, they're rental machines, but they do have a maintenance program, so I kind of like those. A friend of mine buys a lot of Sunbelt machines from the auction because it seems like you'll get fuel issues or bad fuel pumps, or a lot of times it's not major issues, and instead of fixing them, Sunbelt will just auction them off on the online auctions. A friend of mine buys a lot of those Sunbelt machines, gets them back, puts a little bit of money into them, and flips them and makes a ton of money off those. So that's really cool. So yeah, I mean, we see our fair share of them because a lot of people buy them because there's so many of them out there than anyone else. So let's see. Looks like I had a stream disconnected. Hopefully we're still good to go here, but let's see. Maybe I missed a question, but yeah, Mike said that was the Rogue X from Con Expo. Let me put that back up. That's a pretty cool picture. That's a prototype machine that was all hand welded just a couple of days before Con Expo. They put it in there. So that's a battery powered machine, 60 kilowatt electric battery in there. So really that's a power supply. It's a tracked power supply is how they would describe that machine. And you know, you can pull off you know, the loader arms and the bucket that you see there, you can pull that off. You can put like a man lift platform on there, or you can put, you can turn this into a light tower. It's just a very versatile machine. They're going to have all kinds of attachments based off just the base of the machine. It's just a track machine, and it's just a very universal. It's like putting attachments on your Milwaukee weed eater, you know what I mean? You can put an edger on it, you can put a blower on it, a sweeper, you know what I mean? It's just going to be a very versatile electric machine. And like I said, it can also be a power supply for, like, let's say you're building a ski resort or something, you can't get power up there into the ski lifts or whatever. They can drive this up there, and you got a big 60 kilowatt battery that you can actually charge off a 2,000 watt generator. I know everyone says, well, why not just haul a, anyways, we won't talk about electric versus charging with gas powered generators right now. More on the T62, it's a 22, it's the 5-inch screen, no touch screen, all fuse is good. So like Mike said, yeah, start with the connections and the, so if you see any green corrosion or anything in there, and then you probably got a burned or corroded wire, or that actual pin's corroded, so you have to depin it, fix it, and go from there. So all fuses are good. So yeah, check those connections. If you still can't get anything after blowing them and clean out the connections, and it might just be the update, we'll have to go in there and just reset that. If you still can't figure it out, I talked to someone about on this. Was that you? I don't know if that was you, but someone anyways had a stick go up through the bottom of the machine and messed it up. So they sent me the screen. If you want to send me the screen, we can test it for you. We can plug it out. We can even update it for you and send it back to you. And that way, instead of buying a $1,000 screen, you can send it to us, and for $50, we'll test that screen for you and make sure that the screen actually works. Let's see. Yeah, green machine at the shop right now, but I think we got that one straightened out. Someone was asking me, I saw, was it in the chat or someone, and going back to this green machine in the shop, someone asked me, maybe it was an email. Like I said, I'm just getting behind on my emails and my texts, but someone asked me about they're having low rail pressure and high temp fuel codes, and Mike and I just dealt with this on this machine. We had high fuel temperature and we had rail pressure codes on the machine. It turned out it was the fuel pump. We just swapped the fuel pump on it, and it looks like it's working good now. So whoever asked that question, that was a good question. Maybe I just hadn't got to it because I'm so far behind, but yeah, so that just reminds me of that green machine that Mike did a great job troubleshooting that one as well. I don't do much anymore. I know I keep complimenting Mike and everything that he does, and I'm not getting any credit anymore for anything. Bobcat E32 seems like the engine is over-revving at full throttle. Is there any way to adjust it? So I'm assuming that you've got an E32, probably an I. That would be the Kubota engine. I'm sorry, that would be E35. So yeah, E32, more than likely you've got the Kubota engine. Why is it over-revving? It should not over-rev. It seems like there's going to be a governor issue there. And what's it revving at? The governor should take over. I don't know if you've got the, like I said, we'd have to look at serial number and everything on that, but those usually do have an electric actuator that controls the throttle on there. So there's an electrical actuator on the engine, and as you turn your dial, the actuator moves the throttle up and down. But even at wide open throttle, it should not over rev. Maybe we've got a leaking injector or something. Maybe we're getting a little extra fuel into the engine causing it to over rev, or there's a governor issue. But it'd be very rare on those Kubota engines to have a governor issue. Very, very rare, unless we got a broken spring or something like that. Even then, I can't see that being the issue. It'd almost be reversed. You wouldn't be able to rev enough. So maybe leaking injector or something. Pull those injectors out, pop test them. Yeah, it's hard to say. You said it seems like it's over revving. I mean, you can get a photo tack. If that one doesn't have a tack on, I don't know what screen you have, but you can get a photo tack, put it on that engine, on the balancer or something. Really cheap on Amazon. You can get a $25 photo tack, and see what your RPM actually is on that engine compared to spec. I don't know spec off the top of that engine because I'm not even sure exactly which engine it is, but usually about 2200 is where you want to be on that. Yeah, Mike's asking William if you check the cab controller connector under the cab. So yeah, that's what we're talking about. That's the next place you want to go, is check those fittings and stuff. Let's see. Dan says he sees a lot more United Rentals broke down than the Sunbelt ones here in Texas. Yeah, that's interesting. Let's see. I feel like rental machines are neglected across the board. Yeah, they kind of are. Let's see. Boomer pump. Brady controller issue. Which one's that? Are you talking about that A300? I don't know if that was a boomer pump in that one, because it was a 20, what did he say, 2000? That's why I wasn't sure without the serial number. I'm not sure if that's the controller style or if that's the electric actuator. Not the electric controller, but the actual stem and coil. So we'd almost have to go back and look at that. So that's kind of weird. The machine only goes forward, not the joystick stuck. Yeah, it doesn't necessarily have to be a stuck joystick. The inside the base, they're electronic, and the joystick can move just fine, but the actual sensor inside the joystick could be stuck in the forward position. The controller can be seeing an electrical signal coming from the internal sensor saying that it wants to drive forward. But you should have some kind of code when you start the machine. That's what I was going to ask. Does it, as soon as you start it, does it try to drive forward, or is it until you release the brakes it tries to drive forward? There's a lot of questions, a lot of things that we'd have to see and kind of go into that. Let's see. William did check the cab controller harness, and if all that checks out and is really clean, no tarnish, then go down to that hub controller I was telling you about. Okay, Wilder's still trying to jump in here. Let's see. The joysticks are free to move, but it's just stuck in the. Yeah, we just talked about that. Could do that bypass test at the pump, right? Which bypass test at the pump? I'm not sure. For future reference, in the SJC hydrostatic pump, when replacing the plastic bushing, would you also go ahead and change the sensor as well, or don't even worry about the sensor? Have you seen the cost of those sensors? That's the only downside is those swash plate sensors are very expensive, so if you don't suspect it's an actual sensor issue, I tend not to replace them. Just because they're very, I don't remember what the price is, but they are very expensive for those sensors. So when you replace the bushing, what you're going to do is just make sure that your swash plate sensors are centered. You know, you can adjust them in the pump. Just make sure they're as centered as possible. And then when you put everything back together, you're going to run some drive calibrations. And not just one. Sometimes they say 8 to 10 calibrations. You want to just keep doing them over and over and over again to make sure that the ECU or the drive controller make sure it gets center and everything back. And if you're still having issues, then you might. So I see what you're saying. Like, you don't want to do all that work because those sensors are hard to get to, but for the price of them, it's almost worth taking a chance just reusing them, in my opinion. Good to see you again. Have you ever replaced all 4 injectors on a Doosan D34P without programming them? What's the result? What's the difference? Okay, I'll try to go over this real quick. Me personally, I always program them just because I can. It's easy to do. So what happens is the injectors are brand new. When they're built from the factory, they run them on a test bench, and they know exactly how these injectors are firing, exactly how they perform, exactly how they time, and every one of them's different. That's why we got those 10-digit long codes. So optimally, for optimum engine performance, you know, we want to, the ECU needs to see what a new injector is capable of. You know, how fast it's cycling, how much fuel, how often. We're talking about microseconds, and if you don't know what a microsecond, it's like a millionth of a second. And all this matters. So over time, it's called minimum drive pulse. Our ECU is learning as conditions of the fuel changes the injectors wear out, they start getting slower, maybe combustion changing, compression's changing, and everything in the engine. So as conditions are changing, the ECU constantly learns how to change that injector to optimally. What we're trying to do is we're trying to ultimately, the whole combustion process, we're trying to control temperature, and that's why we do so many changes. Like, we do up to 7 pulses. So you got pre-injection, main injection, and post-injection. All that comes into play when we're talking about how fast these cycles and how precise they have to be. So let's say you've got an injector going out, and this injector's been going out for, I don't know, quite some time, several months, but the engine still starts and runs, still runs okay. So your computer is constantly adjusting for that bad injector, okay? So maybe it needs more fuel because it's not cycling very well, or whatever the case may be. So you put a new injector in there, the ECU still thinks that old injector's in there and says, okay, I need to still fire this injector because I don't know what's in there now. I'm firing it based off the information I have off the old injector. You could be overfueling, underfueling, so you could have rich conditions, lean conditions, and it could cause engine damage. Can you start the engine and run it? Yeah, for the most part, most people don't have issues. A lot of people do. They start it and they run it. The ECU will eventually catch up. It'll eventually relearn, but it does take some time. And if that thing is way out of calibration based off the old injector information and it applies that information to the new injector, you could cause engine damage. So it's best to just get them programmed. All right. Let's see. You can see if something is stuck in the spools by manually activating the solenoids on the pump controllers. I'm sure Mike's way ahead of me on that one. I don't know. I appreciate the input. I've got a local guy said he would sell me track frames for $2K each. I think I spent $1,300 to replace one roller and a set of springs on my 2009 T320. So it would be cost effective. In your case, yeah, if you can get the track frames for $4,000. So what I would do, so the main frame is the same, but there was serial number breaks. So what you need to do is just make sure when you go into Bobcat parts catalog online, parts.bobcat.com, or anyways, you can go in there and just make sure that your serial number matches. So find out the serial number the track frame's coming off of, match it to your serial number, and look in the parts catalog and make sure both those track frames fit the same frame. And it should, based off just being a T320. But I would, before I spent $4K, I would just double check and just make sure. Like I'm 90% sure it's going to work just fine, but I would make sure before I spent the money. Let's see. First Fast Sleeper, thank you. I definitely like my T595. Does everything I need it to. Just need enclosed cab. Enclosed cab makes a big difference, and the enclosed cab on the R series is superior to the M series in my opinion, because it's a one-piece pressurized cab. I mean, they try to say the M series are one-piece pressurized or sealed cabs, but not even comparable to the R series. Mike says, so William, the problem I had in the screen went blank on me. The wake-up wire for the screen had corroded in the connector itself. Might tug on each wire. Yep, absolutely right. Check each wire in that just to make sure. Yeah, that filter setup is awesome. I had issues with a few Bosch injectors at my last job on trucks, but nothing like the Delphi system. Truck almost had 200,000 miles. Man, we've seen a couple Bosch pumps and stuff go out, but not much of anything on the Bosch systems. Man, I'm still way behind. Sorry, guys. Do you have a story about the flipped over S570? It was always an issue with that customer. Thing was always broke. They were just so hard on it. But what they do is they if you see that, let me go back to it real quick. So this big recycled cardboard. What they do is they get all this recycled cardboard from the Walmarts, and they have aluminum ramps that go up into the back of enclosed 18-wheeler trailers, and those ramps are pretty steep. So I think they just got this load too high as they were going up those ramps, and like I said, the machine just flipped over backwards right off the ramps and landed right there, kind of where you've seen it. So yeah, we just used another machine. We just flipped it right back over on its wheels, pulled the injectors, checked all the fluids, topped everything off. We had that thing running in about an hour. So yeah, accidents happen, and that was one of them. Nobody was hurt, luckily, because these guys may or may not have had a seatbelt on. I don't know. I didn't get a clear answer on that. Of course, they said they did, but he was not hurt, just shaken up on that one. Let's see. Do you have a... Okay, Michael, or he's asking Mike, is that on the back of the screen or the cab controller? What color wire number on it? It's definitely on the back of the cab controller. I don't know what the color... I think a lot of those are white, but I don't know the number on it. Mike could probably look that up. Let's see. I would stick with Sunbelt if you're making good money. Start a side hustle. Not sure what you're referring to on that one. Maybe you had another question. Maybe I'm missing something. I am, man. That's okay. Yeah, Joe said he's been a rental mechanic for like 6 years now, and I'm really comfortable where I am at because it's gravy work, but I feel like I need to make a change. Yeah, I get it. I started out, well, I was like 19 when I started at Caterpillar on the wash pay, and then I kind of moved over to the rental. So I spent a lot of time in rental too, and I enjoyed it, man. I love the equipment. I love the fast pace of the rental business. the amount of, so like for Sunbelt or United Rentals, the amount of knowledge you get and access to different makes and models of machines is incredible. But there's nothing like the stress of being your own independent mechanic. The grass isn't always greener on the other side. Depends on how you look at it. But anyways, sometimes it's tough. Going out on your own is really tough. Yeah, just to have to show up and nothing to worry about except get broken machines fixed. There's something to be said for that. Get you a paycheck all the time, don't have to worry about anything. Yeah, it's awesome. Let's see. Would stick with Sunbelt if you're making good money. Start a side hustle. Yeah, definitely start a side hustle. Save up a ton of money until then when you're ready to make that change, then you can make that change. You can buy your own service truck and get your own shop, whatever your future, whatever you want to do in the future. But side hustle, a lot of people like to do a side hustle that involves their hobbies. Those end up costing you money. What are you laughing at? My wife's back there. We've had plenty of side businesses that involved hobbies, and yeah, you always want to test everything out that you buy for sale, and yeah. Anyways, let's see. William says, Michael, I will do that. Thanks for the update Brady was talking about. Where would I find this? Like Mike said, you do have to have the software to update the screen, or you can send it to us and we can update it and check that screen for you. And we do have the software. Like if you saw that last video we did, we've got all the software and interfaces and everything for the engine, the Bobcat side. So if you bought that kit, you could do it all yourself. Dan says he needs a mic. Dude, yeah, Dan, that was probably the scariest thing that I did was hire someone else. But I knew I was on my own for not even a month, and I was like, there's no way I can do this by myself. The amount of workload and everything that was coming in, trying to do service and shop, there was just no way. So it was very scary to hire someone and be responsible for their livelihood. But it's the best thing I ever did. And now we've got, how many mechanics? We've got 1, 2 and a half plus Ethan a half, so a total of 3 plus me, so 4 techs. I call Ethan's part-time. You know, my son, y'all met him, and then we've got Joel, and then we've got Angel. He kind of handles our rental side, but he's kind of doing washing and checking and all that, but he's buying his own tools. He's really starting to kind of move into kind of a lighter mechanic side. He's doing oil changes, changing tracks and stuff like that. So he's learning and he's moving up really quick, and he's showing a lot of interest in moving up. And I kind of let him do his own thing, but he really relies on Mike. Mike's just a great mentor at his age. For everybody that works in that shop, they all go to Mike. Nobody talks to me anymore. Everybody needs a mic. That's exactly what Dan just said. Let's see. Genie and GLG have fallen off. As far as service-wise, I've kind of noticed that it's nearly impossible to get any information from it. Back when I was in rental, dude, you'd call them up, and them guys would be on the phone. They'd walk you through anything instantly. Now it takes an act of God to talk to anybody as far as Genie and JLG goes. Worked on a T66 today. This is Kevin. Crank no start, opened the valve cover, and found one of the intake rocker had fallen out of place. First time seeing that. So a few minutes ago when I was talking about my friend that buys those Sunbelt machines that don't start, he bought a T66 for like $7,000 or $8,000, I think he said. Oh, because it had a dead cylinder. Bobcat came out to them and diagnosed it as a dead cylinder and wanted to replace the engine, so they just put it up for auction. So we bought this thing for dirt cheap. Brought it back to a shop, pulled the valve cover, same thing. A rocker had fallen off. Why they fall off, I'm not sure. Maybe they weren't torqued right from the factory, but it's not very uncommon. I've seen and heard of that happening several times. But he got a steal on that machine. He put it back on, fired right up and run perfect. So Bobcat came out there, diagnosed it as a dead cylinder, so they had to replace the whole engine. It turned out just to be a rocker arm. So, yeah, great point there. Thanks for pointing that out. That just reminds me of that machine he bought. I don't know how he gets so lucky. He buys these machines that people sell off as just dead never run again, and he always gets them back, and it's always something simple. Skyjack is the king of aerial, in my opinion. I'm glad you said that. We just bought a Skyjack scissor lift. Seems to be a nice machine. I think it came from where?
Can you easily put a quick coupler other than the exchange on a Bobcat excavator? That's my one knock on Bobcat excavators is the exchange system because it's hard to get custom bucket. That's when Daniel Matthews.
Oh, you're caught up. Sorry, I got wife in the background trying to help me with this. Can you easily put a quick coupler other than the exchange on a Bobcat excavator? That's one of my knock on the Bobcat excavator, the exchange system, as hard as it is to get a custom bucket. Can you easily put a quick coupler other than the exchange on a Bobcat excavator? Yes. To answer that, I'm hoping I'm reading this right. If you got something different than the exchange, you know, that you got the hydraulic version and you got the pin on, but all the Bobcat buckets are designed for the exchange, you know, as far as Bobcat buckets go. But we did a video not too long ago of Rhinox. Is it Rhinox or Rhinox? They make the couplers for all those Bobcat machines, and it's a snap-on. So you literally hook it. You don't even have to get out of the cab. You hook it and you just snap it in, and then you just use a little bar to unlock it when you want to change the buckets. I call it Rhinox. I think it's Rhino X, but we put one on a little E20. Awesome, awesome attachment. So yeah, there's a lot of options, but you have to change your buckets. I don't know of that's what the exchange is based off of is the buckets. So if you want to change buckets and exchange and a new coupler, yeah, absolutely you can do that. When I plug into it, no updates are due unless I'm missing something. So you plug into it with your software. And there's no, unless somebody updated it, I'd be surprised if that screen's up to date, depending on what software you got. It looks like Mike's got you taken care of as far as that goes. What do you recommend for fuel additive for the 22 T66? Thanks. So as far as fuel additive goes, I do like the Bobcat. So it's like, what kind of oil do you like? I mean, everyone's going to have a different opinion on this. People like Stanodyne, people like Hot Shots. I like Hot Shots, but Bobcat fuel additive, not that I'm pushing Bobcat stuff, I'm just telling you how it works, is they don't make their own fuel additive, but the Bobcat engineers do blend the specific recipe, and they have it blended for them based on the fuel systems that we use. But again, it's kind of like the CP3, CP4 pumps. They all kind of work the same. You know what I mean? We're trying to add lubricity basically to the fuel. So it depends on what we're trying to do. Is it just trying to add a lubricant to the fuel? Are we trying to disperse water? What are we trying to achieve? That's kind of what comes into play when we're talking about fuel additive. One thing to note that our filters are so fine that the fuel additive particles are a little bit bigger. So more is not better, especially like diesel 911 or something like that. If you overdo that in the wintertime, our filters will actually filter that out, and you'll plug up the filter using too much additive. So whatever additive you decide to use, whether it's Bobcat, Hot Shot, Stanodyne, again, it depends on what you're trying to do. I would go with the Bobcat just because that's what is recommended. And they recommend putting the additive in every other tank of fuel, which is actually a good idea. So every other tank of fuel, put the recommended amount of fuel additive in there. More is not better. Hopefully that answers your question. I like Hot Shots. I use Hot Shots in my truck. I would use it in my machine, no problem. So just my opinion. How can I find out the year of my T190? So there's the easiest way is back by your serial number plate or somewhere on the machine. You're going to have a white emissions sticker. It's going to be white, and it's going to have a bunch of black lettering on it. And in the bottom right corner of that white emission sticker, hopefully it's still there, you'll have a 2-digit number on there, and that's going to be your year. You know, 00 or 01 or 05 or 99 or whatever the case. There was a T190 had many years. So that's the easiest way to do. Hopefully that emission sticker is still on there, and usually that emission sticker is like, if it's not next to the serial number plate, it's usually on the opposite side of the loader arms. But it should have that emission sticker on there somewhere, and it'll have it on there. Other than that, you know, we can kind of go off the serial number and do a best guess within 2 or 3 years. And I think you can actually call Bobcat headquarters, give them the serial number. They'll tell you exactly what year it is. I just don't know what phone number that is. But people do say that they do have a line that you can call, and they can give you the year on that. Let's see. Mike, it looks like you've got William taken care of. Have you ever worked... Oh my gosh, I just slid the slider again and got lost.
Wacker Neuson skids or excavators.
Yeah, I actually owned one. Good Lord, how do I get so far behind?
Is the resistance of a good canvas circuit always 60 ohms on all Bobcat machines?
Let's see. I'm trying to find... See, without Mike, I get lost here. All right, perfect panel screen. Have you ever worked on or seen Wacker Neuson skids or excavators? Yeah, I actually owned a Wacker Neuson skid, Perkins engine. What I like about the Wackers is, I mean, so like I said, a lot of these people, they put their name on it, but all the components, like I said, they were Perkins. They all buy engines, they all buy components, and so the Wackers are actually using the same Rexroth drive motors and stuff the Bobcats are, which are excellent drive motors. So like all the hydraulic systems and the engines and all that are really good stuff. I mean, they're good machines. The only problem with the Wacker Neusons, it's access to information. So when I bought my Wacker, I had an issue. I actually bought it from a guy who couldn't fix it. They replaced the whole entire fuel system and everything. They still couldn't fix it. They replaced like the injector harness and everything, still didn't fix it, so they just sold it to me really cheap. I had a hard time with it because I couldn't make any sense of the codes, couldn't find any information on it, but luckily I talked to somebody in a rental company on one of my sites that says, he sent me a picture. He's like, yeah, check the wiring harness right here, and it's like down on the side of the engine where they wire tied it, like right next to the oil dipstick tube, and it rubbed through the harness, and that's exactly what was causing the injector issues. So it was a simple fix, but hard to find because they're just, so that's what I mean is, it's not like Bobcat where you ask a question about anything and there's going to be 1,000 responses. 1,000 people are going to get different opinions and different ways of checking things. So that's the only thing about buying machines like that is just access to information. Can you find a manual? So try to find a Wacker manual. You're going to get 100 different options. Half of them are going to be in German or whatever the language is that they use. And then they got all these revisions, and nothing makes sense. When you're sitting here looking through 50 manuals, they're all the same serial number, they're all different revisions. You click on one, it turns out it's not your machine. You're like, what the hell's going on? It's just so frustrating to work on those machines to me because I don't specialize in them. But anything I don't understand, I think is a piece of junk. So I'm not saying that it's a piece of junk, but I just always look at parts and service when I make a decision on buying a machine. Now that I've replaced, so yeah, Mike's good on that. I know as soon as I touch this, I'm going to mess up again. All right. 60 or 80 ohms, forget the spec. No, it's either 60 or 120. So 60 ohms with everything plugged up because you've got termination resistors in both sides of the harness. So let's say in M series, you got a termination resistor up in near the panel, and you've got a termination resistor in the back. So if you unplug the cab harness from the mainframe harness, then you're splitting it, and then you're going to have that 120 ohms. But with everything plugged in, you should have 60 ohms anywhere on the CAN bus system. So yes, to answer your questions, a good CAN bus circuit is 60, and then if you split the harness and you're at 120, it should be either or. And I always find that it's like 1 or 2 ohms off, but it's pretty close to that 60 and 120. Yeah, 120 on an R series is what I'm seeing. Yeah, so that depends. So the R series termination resistors are different than the M series, where we had different termination resistors. Now we've got termination resistors on the R series, like in every controller. So yeah, 60 or 120 is what you're looking for in those cases, depending on what machine you're working for and how you break down the harness and how you separate controllers and stuff. So you're going to look for either short story, you're going to look for either one of those numbers, 60 or 120. So in my case, I'm assuming it's better to just replace the whole pump instead of trying to rebuild due to price of parts, because one side would ruin the other. Yes. Yeah, usually when you lose one side of a rotating group, it's going to take out the other side of the pump, and we just talked about how expensive those rotating groups are. So it's just not quite even worth rebuilding, because if you mess something up or you miss something, then you got to pull that pump back out. So it's better to kind of put that responsibility on someone else and just make sure that when you do it, you know the pump's going to have a warranty or whatever the case may be, but you just got to let the customer know that you don't warranty labor, whatever they decide to do. If they buy a used one, aftermarket one, or a whatever the case may be, just be careful to protect yourself on the labor side. But yes, due to price on rebuilding them, it's better just to replace them. Dan says 60 ohms is a good spec. Yep, we just talked about that. 60, 120, depending on where you're checking and if you separated the harness. And then if you have 120, then you might have a break in the harness somewhere if you haven't unplugged anything, depending on which machine you're checking. So you really have to pay attention to those circuits and those schematics and see how those termination resistors and where those termination resistors are. Should be two 120 ohms gives you 60. Why did Doosan never stick with the Kubota engine in their skid steer? Emissions. It just deals with emissions. And the problem is, even when when Kubota went to their Tier 4 engine, see, Kubota is still using a DPF. DPF systems are inferior. We're using SCR on Bobcat, SCR system. Still use DEF, but it's SCR as opposed to DPF. And the SCR systems hardly never fail. It's just a great system. And the reason we can use an SCR where Kubota can't is because when we were talking about the injectors and how precise and microseconds, we run a higher compression, a higher fuel pressure, and just a much better designed system to have a much cleaner burn in the combustion chamber. That's why we can run SCR as opposed to DPF. So the Doosan engines are just, in my opinion, it's a much better engine than the Kubota engines. So that's why, number one, it was emissions, and we needed a better engine to begin with. Now, Bobcat still uses Kubotas in some of the excavators, and it's almost always Kubota or even the Coyote engines, but almost like all your MTs and what are those little articulated loaders, Mike? Yeah, so anyways, we still use Kubota engines, but as far as Tier 4 goes, where it's got to be Tier 4 compliant, Doosan's just a more superior engine, just much better combustion, much better after treatment system, just everything about it, in my opinion, is better. Much more reliable, easier to work on. I could go on and on. I think it's because it's cheaper to source their own engines. Yeah, well, like I said, it might not be cheaper. I think maybe the Doosan engines might be a little expensive, but they are a much better design, much better combustion process, much better. So it just works a lot cleaner, higher. So there's so many things that we could go into as far as how these engines work, why they're so much cleaner, and they are so more efficient, and they work so much better than a DPF. And usually if you have an SCR issue, it's because of codes. I think Dan probably just ran into that not too long ago, is that we can only handle about 10 codes in DC before you start getting not a DSOX, but a dosing code or a tampering code, so we have to clear those out with. That's the only thing I don't like about it, is if you do get issues with your SCR, you do have to have an ECU to clean it out, but you don't necessarily have to run. And we can do it like a forced, what we call is a DSOX, desulfurization, as opposed to like a, shit, I just lost my train of thought. But a DSOX is different than like a regen, where you're pumping a bunch of fuel in there. Anyways, much better system. Where am I at? Okay. So he says, it seems that since the smaller rental companies are getting bought out by the big corporations like United and Sunbelt, the rental equipment is not as bad to buy as before. And that is, I can go along with that very easily, because it seems like all the mom and pop rental companies are getting bought out by these bigger companies. And I mean, I hate to see it, but they're paying like 10 times what these companies are worth, and just for the owners, it just makes perfect sense to sell out. But yeah, it just opens up a lot more equipment out there. How to access HVAC electrical on A45. I have no power to AC compressor. I'm not sure what you're trying to access. We have to see why you have no power to the AC compressor. The first thing you got to check is you're going to have a thermostat on there. Mike might be able to tell you exactly where that thermostat's located, but the thermostat has a flash code on it. The flash code will kind of tell you what the problem is. It's probably a 2-flash open circuit, and it could be anything from that little rocker switch where you turn on the AC. That's a big issue. And then you have to check your pressure switch. The two things that give you open circuit, other than a real open circuit, a damaged wiring harness or something, is the bad rocker switch. So you want to pull that switch out, check, make sure you're actually getting continuity 12 volts across it when you flip that switch. And then you have to put gauges on the system, make sure you actually have pressure in your system, and then you can jump out your actual pressure switch, and then that'll make sure that all your connections are good and see if your compressor comes on. And then you check for 12 volts at your compressor and make sure that your clutch is even working. You know, it could be that you've got 12 volts to the plug, but just the clutch on the compressor is not engaging. So I think that thermostat is behind that little foot panel on your right. You have to pull that whole panel off and you'll find the thermostat inside there, I believe. Let's see, under the screen and cup holder. Yeah, so under the screen and cup holder, you look next to your left foot, that whole panel will pop off. I'm sorry, your right foot. That whole panel will pop off, and that'll give you access to the blower motor, the evaporator, and everything that you need for the AC. But again, you got the pressure switch and everything that's outside of that you're going to have to check. So that's a few things you have to check for that. Are the Devon and Bobcat skid steers the exact same? No, they're not the exact same. They're way different. Basically the same company, but way different. They both use the Doosan engines. That's kind of really the only similarity. But as far as if you look at them close side by side, if you've actually been up to them, yeah, two completely different machines, but I think they're going to be good machines. I like what I see. I saw them at Con Expo. I went over them, got to go all through them. I like what I see on those. I don't have a lot of experience with them, but they are different machines, and I like what I see. Let's see, Mike will try to pick up on the E45 where I left off. Let's see, those sensors they don't really see them fail. So I'm assuming you're talking about the swash plate sensors, and I think I even mentioned that in one of my videos, is those swash plate sensors are pretty solid. It's very rare a sensor goes bad. I've seen them, yeah. We've had bad sensors, but very, very rare. It's always usually something in the pump. It doesn't make sense how expensive they are. I want to say they're like $900 or something. I don't know. I'd have to go back and look. Let's see. Dan says, I have noticed that the unprogrammed injectors will fuel knock for quite a while until the computer catches up. It could cause damage to your engine. It'll definitely run. Yep, I think that's what we talked about. Why that fuel knock is because it could be over-fueling based off the other old injector under-fueling. So it's all electronic pulses is how we control the amount of fuel entering the combustion chamber. So the ECU doesn't know any better. It's just trying to go off the best information that it's been learning that injector trim file. It's been teaching itself for years probably. And then you just throw a new injector in there, and then the computer don't know that you put a new injector in there. It's just going to fire off based what it had learned on the old one. Dan says the shop that he does. I'm sorry?
You missed the one right up above.
Oh, I missed one. Okay, what do you recommend for hydraulic test gauge, test port fittings for the Bobcat? It depends on what you spend. I like the electronic gauges. They're a little more expensive, but just regular glycol filled manual gauges are fine. You want to get you like a 500 PSI if you're checking charge pressure, or maybe even 1,000. So buy you a kit. So if you don't get an electric gauge, you're going to need several hydraulic glycol filled gauges. You can get them on Amazon, or it just depends. It's like anything. You can spend as much money as you want. It depends on how often you're doing this. But you'll want like a 500, a 1,000, and probably maybe a 3,000, and maybe even a 5,000 PSI gauge. Because there's several things that we check on the Bobcat. We check charge pressure, right? That's up to 500 PSI up on the bigger machines. So that's where the 500 PSI gauge would come in, or maybe even the 1,000. maybe not a 3,000. Maybe you just want to go straight to 5,000. So maybe a 1,000 and a 5,000 is probably what I would have if I was just getting regular gauges. Maybe even more than a 5,000. I'll explain. So 1,000, check charge pressure. 5,000, that'll give you your main system pressure. You know, you're usually around 3,500 psi on main system pressure. But if you're checking a drive motor or something, well, with this information, you can buy whatever injectors you want. So the drive motors, the hydrostatic pumps, when we check those, they've got internal reliefs in the pump. They're around 5,000 psi. So you could max out a 5,000 psi gauge pretty quick if you're checking drive pressure or pumps off or pressure off the hydrostatic pumps. And we did a video on that too, how we check the hydrostatic pumps. And we've got a box of fittings as far as that goes, you know, whether, because we'll check main system pressure on the auxiliary couplers. You've got a couple different test port sizes on the machines, on the excavators versus the little bit larger test port on the skid steers. But on the skid steers, we make, depending on what we're checking, we have our own fittings. We make our own hoses and stuff to check whatever system part of the machine that we're checking. So hopefully that kind of answered some questions. I mean, I don't know the exact names of those test ports fittings. I don't. I mean, we've got them all. But I just can't tell you the names of them off the top of my head or the sizes, I guess. Dan said he noticed that the unprogrammed injectors, oh, we just talked about that. The shop he does business with never programs injectors, has never blown anything up yet. Yeah, like I said, I've never seen it happen. Can it cause premature failure maybe? Yeah. Like I said, plenty of people do it without programming and it runs fine. If you have the ability, in an ideal situation, you definitely want to program the injectors. But people install injectors without programming. Yes, it happens. Let's see, Dev says we changed 4 injectors without programming, runs fine so far, till waiting a complete kit by the end of August, but now when you work the machine it'll bog down and sometimes stall. That's where the software will definitely help, because not only will we program the injectors, there's a bunch of other things that we're going to check, and we're going to do some engine videos based off software. We're going to tell you exactly the test to run, exactly the parameters you're going to want to see, all the systems you're going to want to check, everything from mass airflow to map sensors to injector pulse width. I mean, we're gonna go over everything, checking EGRs, IMVs. Yeah, it's gonna be a long video, but we're gonna go step by step, and we'll probably do it in chapters. So depending on what type of issue you're trying to troubleshoot, you can skip to that chapter and just watch that part. But there's a lot of information that we want to check based off the symptoms that we're trying to troubleshoot. Let's see, check your fuel pickup tube and filter. That's true too. It could be a pinch line. It could be a fuel delivery problem. If it's bogging down as a fuel delivery problem, you should get the 1076-16 code. So it depends on if you have any codes or not. If everything's working fine, no rail pressure codes, you might be looking at a turbo or a charge pressure issue. If you're bogging down, do you see any smoke or anything? With code 0217, hydraulic filter plug, replace the filter with no change, has never had that code in the past 4,000 hours. What machine is that? Again, remind me on that. So what happens is sometimes the bottom of the filter will blow off and it'll stay inside the canister, okay? So when you removed your old filter, a lot of people don't notice. You have to look at the bottom of your filter, and it's got a metal cap on the bottom of the filter. Well, that will blow off in extreme cases, and it'll go down, and it'll be right on the bottom of the canister. So when you put your new filter on top of that, it's just sucking that to the bottom of it, or pushing, I guess, pressurizing that to the bottom of the canister, and that'll continue to cause a hydraulic filter plug on where we're talking about M-series machines here. So you'll have to remind me if that's a machine, if you have an M-series or what machine you have, because it could just be, a bad sensor in that case. E45 is a 2015. Yeah, 2015, that panel by your right foot, we're going to take that off. You should see the thermostat back in there, and it should have just a red flashing light on it. It's going to be a 1, 2, or a 3 flash code, and that'll kind of help you troubleshoot that. Let's see, shouldn't bog down with unprogrammed injectors. That's what we're talking about. The injectors shouldn't bog it down. It's probably something fuel delivery or a boost issue.
That was a T770 2014.
2014 T77, I would definitely suspect that bottom of that hydraulic filter blew off. So if you still have your old filter, see if that piece is there, or pull your filter out now and put you a magnet down in there and see if that see if you pull up the base of that old filter. Thanks. I've got the wife in the background helping out. All right, we've seen enough of that flip machine. This is my favorite picture here. If I run high flow deadheaded and turn one way, it will basically stall. Well, that's good. Well, I'm not sure what you mean, because usually if you deadhead the hydraulics, that puts a big load on the engine, and then you're turning, that puts another big load on the engine. So did it not do that before? Maybe, I guess that's what you're saying. Let's see if full RPM. Dang, man, I just did it again.
So good at MRH grading. My hydraulic filter plug code was caused by a bad sensor in the hydraulic filter I was in.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. If you don't find that the filter blew apart, then it could just be as simple as a bad sensor on that thing.
Dan Gotro says, I'm very happy on my own at the moment, working on only Bobcat machines, plenty of workflow in person, not so overwhelmed anymore.
Dan says he's very happy on his own at the moment, working on only Bobcat machines. So you kind of found your niche. You know, I met Dan over the phone years ago, and I think weren't you more automotive, and then he kind of went out and started doing other machines, and now he kind of find his niche. He kind of sticks with Bobcat machines. Because I called Dan for some advice the other day. You know, we rely on each other in this business. You know, we don't know everything about everything, or nobody knows everything about everything. Anyways, you know what I'm trying to say. Because it's harder to find the information about those. It was a simple issue I was trying to troubleshoot, but there's no information out there on it. If I had that same issue on a Bobcat, you'd get pages and pages and pages of information on how to troubleshoot the issue that I was looking at on a Kubota. So yeah, there's plenty of work out there for the Bobcat machines. The dealers are, someone mentioned in one of my comments on that video that I'm anti-dealer. It's not that I'm anti-dealer. You know, all this stuff that we're doing for you, the owner of the machine, we're more pro-customer, pro-owner, not necessarily anti-dealer. We just want to help support these awesome machines that you guys own and working on or buying. I don't know, we work on all of them. Like I said, I spent 12 years at Caterpillar, and I mean, I bled yellow, you know what I mean? I painted my lawnmowers cat tags, the walls cat, I mean, it was cat everything. And now that I'm a little, I hate that word older, but maybe a little more familiar with these machines, I wouldn't own anything but a Bobcat. Let's see. I wonder where I can get the software and electronics to test my T190. I found some numbers in my manual and tried on the service and the computer to test. Could not find them. I wonder where I can get the software and electronics. So we sell that. We just did a video on that Mac. We have all the software and all the interfaces to plug into your machine. So the Bobcat interfaces are very, very expensive. So we built our own interfaces and with our own protocol to talk to the Bobcat softwares and engine softwares. So like I said, we've got all our own interfaces and stuff. So for your T190, you don't have an electronic engine, so all you need is the Bobcat software and the Bobcat interface. So it's not a remote start box. You can turn the machine on and off from the box that I have, but it doesn't start the machine. But you don't need that, just to communicate and do test. All right, let's see. Voice is starting to give out on me. We will try to run over a couple more things here. High-tech redneck. Oh my goodness, man. Thank you so much. Wow, that is, yeah, that's huge. Like I said, you don't know how much little things like that mean to me. I always have to pause for a second and pretend like I'm not getting choked up. That's huge. I really, really appreciate that. Okay, I see the jowl test has the testing equipment for just about any equipment, a little pricey, but I'm sure a major repair shop. I'm sure there are plenty of people a lot of people, and Dan can probably kind of attest to this, is nothing beats actual dealers software and interfaces. The jowl test, I guess Dan's figured out how to make these jowl test and Texa machines work with the original software. I haven't played with that a lot. I just built my own interfaces because I specialize in Bobcat. Yeah, the jowl test, the Texa, they'll talk to many machines, but with ours, we know that it's going to work perfectly like a dealer setup. So yeah, there are options as far as that goes. Do you have a list of sources you trust for injectors? The Friday Parts injectors say they're 100% genuine and new original, but never specifically mentioned Delphi. Just want to be sure. Thanks again. Yeah, I mean, I think they are. They don't come in Delphi boxes though. That's why I'm not sure, because I've bought the Friday Parts injectors. So I'm not 100% excuse me, sure on as far as that goes, but I haven't had any issues with them. Some of your more reputable diesel shops, and hopefully I'll have more injectors in stock here soon. We'll have them on the website. It's just like as soon as I get them, I buy a ton of them, and then we sell out really quickly. So I'll have to get more injectors in stock. And in ours, we stand behind warranty, and they are genuine Delphi. Let's see, but I haven't had any issues with the Friday Part ones. The thing about, we have had issues with Friday parts, but the customer service has been great, and they've always taken care of it. It might cost you a little time or whatever, but they do stand behind their products, and the customer service is good. So there's one thing I can say about that. Fuel injectors are different because it's tough, man. Let's say you lost a fuel pump or something, or if you had water in your fuel rail or your lines and you put a new injector on and you damage your new injector. That's why it's hard to warranty injectors. Man, excuse me, guys. I think I'm about all out of talking ability for the night. But I forget what I was going with that. Yeah, so if you put a new injector on a dirty system, you can take out an injector within minutes. And so that's why a lot of people have a hard time warranting injectors, because it can very easily be the installation, a fault of the installer. We hear about horror stories of electronic repairs here in Florida on newer low-hour machines that had no warning. Some repairs over $10,000 might be worth owning the diagnostic computers. It's definitely... Well, thanks. Yeah, I mean, so the diagnostic equipment, like I said, everything, all the videos that we do, we try to help you diagnose these machines without using this, but sometimes you have to have it, because it's hard for me to answer questions. Like when we get emails and people call in or whatever, it's just like, man, I do the best I can. We can only guess so far. Sometimes we just have to have the software. But think about it. I mean, 1 or 2 calls. My software, I try to keep the prices as low as I possibly can. I mean, you look at other systems out there that do what ours do. You know, we're doing. I designed these systems, these interfaces, and everything. I put a lot of work into these. It took many months to get everything right. But we're trying to keep that price low because we're trying to help you. You know, the owner operator, the people that have the rental companies. I know. One guy I talked to that bought our system has over 30 pieces of equipment, 30 pieces of Bobcat equipment, all brand new, that he bought from a dealer, and they will not help him with any diagnostic equipment or software or anything. So he's like, I got 30 pieces of equipment. I can't wait 2-3 days every time I have a problem for y'all to come out here and look at them or haul them back to the office, which is 2 hours away from where he was staged. So I just can't believe that they will not help him. And that's where the dealers, they don't want, I don't know, I don't want to say don't want to, but this goes back to the whole right to repair thing. We can have a whole nother conversation about right to repair as far as that goes, and why the dealers don't want to do it. They think they're protecting proprietary information, but if you look at this Bobcat software, the engine side, there's nothing proprietary in there that I know of. I mean, all you're doing is just looking at sensors and stuff moving and all, so I don't know. It's more about having the control over those systems and the serviceability, because the service is the absorption rate of the whole dealership, right? They got to have that service in there for the absorption part. anyways, whole nother conversation. I also pulled, man, it did it again. I lost everything.
I also pulled the pickup, so no blogs. I also pulled the pickup out because of the flexible screen. No cracks, etc. Not really neat.
Okay, I got it here. I see. I also pulled the pickup out. It was very flexible. As the flexible screen, no crack, etc. Did really any air coming through the fuel system through the clear hose on the outlet. I guess we're going back to no fuel rail pressure code. So then that's where I'd be looking at your mass airflow and your boost numbers. You know, make sure that you've actually got boost coming from. You know, make sure that your what's that little clip on the diaphragm of the turbo? Fuck. I think I'm just all out of gas. I can't think of what I'm trying to say. Anyways, one easy way to tell is to squeeze the intake hose with the machine wide open throttle and see if it sucks that hose down. Pull the hose off the intake, feel the boost pressure with your hand. Without software, it's hard to know for sure if you're getting enough boost pressure. Because it will not code. If you got low boost or a bad turbo, it will not code for that. The engine doesn't know. Swash plate in Australia, $1,600. Wish I watched the first, did the calibration in the end, and fixed it. Yeah, 1,600 Australian for a swash plate sensor. That's insane, man. It's crazy. Yeah, we got that 20.
Someone else tuning in from Guyana.
We got someone else from Guyana.
Simeon Daniels.
Awesome. So 2 from Guyana. That's odd. Let's see. I will definitely check for that piece of filter missing if it has. Yeah, let me know if you join in next week. Let me know, or text me or email me a picture. I like to see that. I've got a picture somewhere of that failure, but that was pretty common, and it happens on those bigger machines, the 770s and 870s. It seems like it happens more on those than other machines. So tuning in from Guyana. Okay, awesome, man. Really appreciate the overseas, and well, I appreciate everybody being here. It's just neat to see people on from overseas. We're getting up in an hour and 40, close to 2 hours here, but we still got over 60 people tuning in, which is awesome, man. Thanks everybody for being here. A lot of great questions, and thanks everybody for helping out with these questions. Faux Nickel's been super busy ever since I got the diagnostic kit from Tetrad. New and old machines, BAT software itself is super useful for troubleshooting tree. Yeah, thanks for that, man. I really appreciate the shout outs that you and Dan gave me on the video there. And yeah, the diagnostic. So, you know, you try to do as much as you can without it, but now that you have it in the bats and all that, you learn a lot, you know, going through this troubleshooting process. That's what I always say is you might not always get directly to the issue when you're troubleshooting, but you learn so much trying to find that issue and going through actual troubleshooting steps and all. Yeah, our preloaded kits don't usually come with bats. That's actually a little bit extra. That's an added because a lot of people don't even know what bats is or even use that. But if you don't have access to other forms of troubleshooting, bats is a good system to have. It's a little older. It's not updated, so it works great for the older machines and some of the M series, but doesn't do a whole lot of good on the R series. So yeah, Dan was doing automotive like we were talking about earlier, tractors, and now just Bobcat. Yeah, so you learned where the least amount of stress and the best working conditions, and you know, it all pays the same. Why not try to stick with what's easy? Low fuel inlet pressure fault on the R series, no kinks, new pre-filter and main filter. Yeah, so, and again, that's where the software helps. You know, we can plug into that R series with the V2 software, and we can check and see what the actual gauge is showing. You know, you should be 11 to 17 psi. Some systems will show around 7 psi, and I'm not sure what that threshold is. I think that 7 psi is the threshold for low pressure on that fuel system. But we've had some sensors. We've had some problems with the sensors. We've had problems with pickup tubes, or not necessarily the pickup tube, but stuff in the tank getting sucked up to the pickup tube. So low fuel pressure fault on the R series. So I'm assuming, yeah, I'm assuming we're talking about the the low pressure side, the actual, because we got an electric lift pump on there, and that's the code you're getting is for the low fuel inlet pressure. Yeah, so that's coming from the filter, and sometimes it's just the sensor on the filter head itself, and you can tee in a gauge. Since you don't have software, just tee in a gauge on the outlet line going over to the high pressure pump and see what pressure you're getting, and just make sure that, just put a manual cheap, Harbor Freight gauge or whatever the case may be. Just cut the line, put a T in there, splice it back together with a barb fitting or whatever the case may be, whatever's easiest, and just manually check that line pressure and see what it is. Because if you have that 12, 13, 15 psi on the inlet side on your gauge, then then it's probably just a sensor or a wiring issue or a plug. It doesn't sound like you've got any open or high or low, outer range high or low. It could still be fuel delivery. Let's see, you didn't put a pump on yet. You changed the filters, but you haven't replaced the pump. Sometimes we get a little debris stuck in those pumps, but it could just be that electric pump is weak. So that's a few things to check. See, I have a common rail engine that is running with clean fuel lines. However, the primer bulb is getting flat after running for a couple of minutes. If your primer bulb's getting flat, it's a fuel delivery issue, simple as that. So several things. It's either something stuck in the pickup tube, something getting stuck around the screen in the tank, depending on which. It's a common rail, so it doesn't necessarily have a screen on the common rails, but we do have a weighted fitting down in there, and sometimes they'll get filled up with debris. And then that goes up to the top where it comes out of the tank. It comes into a 90-degree fitting, and in that 90-degree fitting, sometimes you can get debris stuck right in that 90-degree because it just goes up in a turn. It's not a very smooth flow through there, and debris will get stuck in there. If you got a bunch of mud and stuff underneath your engine, that mud can actually squish the fuel lines and kind of pinch them off, and that'll cause a fuel delivery problem. So if your bulb is sucking flat, it's a fuel delivery between the filter and the tank. You just have to narrow down what that is. I had one I worked on that was going to be real simple, I thought, so I kept checking everything, and it turned out that the inside of the fuel line actually was coming apart. I had to put a new fuel line in from the tank to the primer bulb, and that's what eventually fixed the one. I had too much time in it. I should have done that to begin with, but I didn't. Okay, I was just told my cutoff is 8 o'clock. Thanks, everyone, for being here and your patience. I'm trying to keep up. Let's see, the phone nickel, the only problem I'm having is working on older machines. It's harder to find certain parts, but then you find like junkyards and tractors, it doesn't work all the time. Yeah, and that's even with the Bobcat stuff. As good as our old the G-Series excavators are amazing, but a lot of parts are getting discontinued through Bobcat, so you have to go through scrap yards and stuff to find those. So that is one thing about the older, especially the Bobcats, but all older machines, is that people are so focused, especially after COVID, on keeping production up on new machines. They're not manufacturing parts for old machines, and they're getting harder and harder to find. So, and then Dan, in his earlier days, did diesel school buses and utility vehicles. So tons of experience with Dan, man. That is a wealth of knowledge, this guy. Quick question, I've got an A300, aux won't work, engine bogs down when I try to use the aux paddle on the right joystick. I get power to the two coils from the controller, but only one works. I might have to think about that one for a minute, and hopefully I'm reading it right. Aux won't work. Engine bogs down when you use the paddle on the right joystick, which tells me it tells me that the aux is working. It's moving because what happens is the coil allows charge pressure to move the spool inside the control valve, and if it moves the spool over, it's almost like it's getting deadheaded somewhere. If the engine's bogging down, it's like deadheading into something. So where that's going to be, I'm not sure. If you got a high flow system, that kind of complicates things. A lot of the A300s did have high flow, but only one works. Maybe, I don't know, swap the coils left to right and see if the bogs down in the other direction when you move the paddle switch. That'll tell you if the coil's moving, but maybe that's the route I would go on that. I'm not sure. Dan likes the Texa kit, but he can't trust the data it gives sometimes when compared to the original software. Yeah, a lot of people complain about the Texa and the jowl test, just not quite like it's like a lot of people describe it as a glorified code scanner, I guess, and just a lot of limited capabilities, or maybe it could just be people don't know how to use them correctly. I don't know, but I just hear a lot of issues like that coming from those. Victor, have you checked the lift pump? Let's see, I don't remember which one Victor was. Low fuel inlet pressure. Yeah, that's what we're talking about. The electric lift pump could be an issue. That's why you want to tee in that gauge and see if your lift pump is actually making that pressure. Review for the E40. Again, the Bobcat excavators are just great machines. I mean, there's a lot of good excavators out there. The Bobcat ones are a little more, well, they're definitely more expensive, but they're more electronically superior, or just much more further advanced. So it depends on what you're trying to do. But like I said, I think all the Bobcat excavators are good size-wise. I'm not sure because I'm not an excavator or an operator. But as far as machine-wise and reliability, incredible. I mean, they're great, and that's why sometimes it's hard for us to answer in-depth questions on excavators because we don't work on them much because they just don't break. Let's see. Phonicle said he heard the diesel laptop setup, which uses the jowl test, is very limiting what you're able to do, and that's what I hear too. It's just like people get them and they spend, you know, $10, $12, $14,000 on a system, and they're kind of let down based off what they were told to do. I was reading the other day in our groups that people said they're just having a hard time with getting service, and when they do have a problem, they're having problems getting updates on their stuff, and it's always asking for an update. It just, I don't know, a lot of people were chiming in, kind of bashing them, but I don't really have any experience with them, so it's hard for me to say for sure. I'm just going off based on what I heard, and then that's secondhand knowledge, or whatever you want to call it. So I try not to stay out of that. I have Service Analyzer for a bit. I will look at boost, etc. too. Yeah, so to look at boost and numbers like that, you're going to need Engine Analyzer and a UVIM to look at the engine side of that. Dan says the diesel laptop setup with Texa is really good for basic engine work and injector programming. I will continue to use it for other brands every once in a while. Yeah, that's what I like about it. If you don't specialize in one brand and you are out there, you just need it every now and then to check codes and stuff on other equipment, because you never know what you're going to run into. I think that's where it comes really handy. Any tips for changing out quick coupler? I mean, oh, that's on a T740. Yeah, so you're changing out the whole attached coupler, I'm assuming. So sometimes what happens, those tapered pins get stuck in there. So what we do, if you can't get those tapered pins, and I don't even try to hammer on the tapered pin because there's not enough room in there to hammer on anything, you basically take your cylinders off, let your attach drop to the ground, and then where the pin in the attach side, because you're putting a new attach on, right? So on the attach, I take a big 8 or 10 pound sledgehammer and I hit right there where the pin goes into the attach. And I'm talking not tapping it, I'm talking like full on chopping wood overhead, wham! And we hit them things hard over and over and over again, and that's how you break that taper. They almost rust or kind of weld themselves into the bore on the loader arm side. You know, you don't want to hit on the loader arm side, you want to hit on the attach side, and it'll break those pins loose, and once they kind of break loose, then you can tap them in and get the attach off. So that's my biggest tip as far as getting the attach off is take a big sledgehammer. Let's see, bats is super nice to have. Yeah, if you have access to bats, it is nice to have, and we can add that to our systems there. Let's see, 2-inch wrench, quick coupler loose when installing new coupler makes the spring doesn't fall out. Quick coupler. See, you're thinking hydraulic coupler. I'm thinking about, so maybe Phonicle's right. Maybe you're talking about the auxiliary coupler, not the attachment plate. I'm thinking of, by reading that, I think you're talking about the coupler plate, the actual attachment plate. Yeah, I spent all day trying to figure it out too. The aux barely works in one direction, but not at all in opposite direction. Like the spool is slightly moving in one direction, but not fully. And that's almost where, so I'm kind of, that's one of the guys that I was working with earlier. I know I got to get back with him. Like his lift and tilt works fine, but he's having a problem with his aux side. So I had him take the spool out, make sure the spool is not sticking in the bore. The spool is moving correctly, and I just hadn't quite figured out why he's got no auxiliary pressure when everything else is working, but his spool wasn't sticking. So that's almost where I would start with you, is just take the cap off and make sure that your spool slides in and out by hand easily, because there could be a piece of debris stuck in one of the relief cuts in the spool, preventing it from moving all the way. So first thing we do is want to remove that spool, make sure it moves in and out by hand. Is hydraulic fluid going to go everywhere? Oh, so maybe Faux Nickel is right. If you're changing out the quick coupler, whatever's in that main line in the boom, if you pull out one of those couplers with a big 2-inch wrench, and you can't even really get a wrench in there. I like to use the Knipex, or a pair of big channel locks or something. That's how we get them out. I do have a big 2-inch wrench that you can kind of get to that top one, but the bottom one is hard to get to, so just a big pair of channel locks. So whatever oil is in the line going up the boom is going to pour out of that. So not like gallons, but you do want to have some type of drain pan or something over there, because, I don't know, maybe not even a half a quart probably. It's going to pour out of that line when you pull the coupler out. So maybe I was talking about, I thought you were talking about the Bobcat coupler, but it sounds like you're talking about the auxiliary coupler. So yeah, when you pull it out. Yeah, and he says be quick. That's what I do. When you screw it out, I have the other one ready and I spin it right back in. So yeah, some oil's going to come out, but it will stop draining. If you pull it all the way out, once that hose drip, all the oil comes out of the hose, it's no more oil is going to come out. Okay, so you guys are way ahead of me. Thanks, I'll do that. Testing, also one thing I'm noticing is the machine will run for a few minutes just fine, and then code for the inlet fuel pressure low. When the code comes on, it will go inactive right away, and then it'll follow that pattern every time. Yeah, man, I've read some issues where people have some intermittent stuff like that. I'm going to have to go back and look, but I just want to make sure that lift pump is keeping up first, and then go on to going more in depth on that. Yeah, that's a great question. Does your engine RPM struggle to go up and down when you get that code? And usually on those Bosch systems, if you have low pressure, see, the Bosch system will still pull fuel in there and make high rail pressure. If it's starved for fuel, that's different, but if it's just low fuel pressure, usually the high pressure pump will pull enough fuel to keep high pressure in there, and you may not bog the engine down, but it'll shut it down. Limp motor, I think it'll shut it down altogether. If it continues to have that code, it'll just turn the engine off on you. So yeah, he was talking about the auxiliary, the hydraulic coupler. I'm assuming he's talking auxiliary. Yeah, you were right. He was talking. Okay, yeah. So you just got an extra tip on how to get the attach out. If you can handle it. Okay, so y'all were talking amongst yourselves there. When the code comes active, it'll limit the machine performance. Yeah, I was going to say it'll either shut the engine down if it's extremely low, or it gets no pressure, it'll actually turn the engine off. Pig Slayer, long time follower, is here. Good to see you, buddy. My T76 engine keeps overheating when running a brush cutter. Wow, okay. I stop and blow the filter, radiator, back door out, and it keeps overheating after 10 to 15 minutes. Any suggestions? So we replace the T76. I mean, we got a whole new cooling package, and I mean, that's the reason we put that engine in line now, is because of cooling issues. So if everything's working properly, you should not have cooling issues on that T76. So what we have to do is we have to check that fan circuit and make sure that fan is actually building full RPM. See, the fan steps up speed as the engine warms up. It's pulse width modulation. We move a stem in there, and we direct the hydraulic flow, either bypassing or just going straight through the fan to speed it up. So what we need to do is make sure that we are getting full RPM. Mike looked that up last week, but we were looking at an M series. I'll have to double check the RPM on the R series. But what you want to do is get a photo tack and put on there, and it's like the M series is what Mike. Well, I think Mike's probably gone to bed now. I think it was like 34, maybe 30, over 3,000 RPM unplugged. So what you want to do is unplug the fan coil with the engine running, and that fan should just wow, like wide open. Sound like a jet taking off. So make sure that the fan circuit's working properly. It could be just a stem in there. It could be that your fan motor itself is going bad. Pull that fan filter off, dump it out into a clean pan, see if you got any debris, any metal, whatever the case, brass or even steel coming from that filter, because anything, if that fan motor is going bad, it's going to catch it in that filter, so that's one thing to check. Okay, I dealt with the same issue today. Ended up being debris in the pickup tube in the tank. Yep. Awesome. I'm in South Texas, 110 degrees every day. So, I mean, you're fighting temperature, not only ambient temperature, but high hydraulic temperature too. So, all right, Dev Blogs, have a good night, Brady and wife. Looking forward to getting the computer set up. Should be a game changer. Yeah, awesome, man. Like I said, they sold out so fast that I'm even trying to get them shipped out right now. I should have been shipping them out, but I had to leave a little early today, and I was out all day today. So I've got some catching up to do. If you already ordered one, either yours has already been shipped or it will be shipped this week. Let's see, sounds good. Jamie and Brady, I will check that lift pump and move forward depending on results. Let's see, Pixelator, I just had one with a sticking fan stem causing overheating. New stem fixed it. Yeah, great point. That's kind of what I was getting to. If the stem is not moving properly, it might not be a bad fan motor. You just got to make sure the stem is moving properly. So that's the test for that. When you unplug it, that stem goes wide open. It allows full flow through the fan and allows that fan to reach maximum RPM. Heat is also dispersed through the fuel tank. Keep up, there's less sink to off-road to. Appreciate you coming here. I'm kind of, okay, maybe we're in another conversation. Any thoughts on why the RPM would wind way up after starting the machine back up after a short break from using it? 2022 T740. No. Why RPM would wind way up after starting the machine back up after a short break from using it? No, I'd almost have to see that. Why it shouldn't do that. Leaking injectors, maybe we're getting fuel leaking into the combustion chamber when you turn it off, and you're starting it up with extra. No, I don't know. That doesn't even make sense. Do you get any smoke or anything out of it? I don't know, man. That's a great question. I'm gonna have to think about that one. Nope, because your hand throttle and your foot throttle should be in the neutral position as long as that foot throttle is not sticking. I mean, a lot of times machines, when I start them up, they're wide open because the foot throttle's sticking. It's not returning all the way back to neutral position, but it sounds like you're just getting a high rev and then it slowly comes back down to idle. That's what I was kind of thinking, Dan, was auto idle. Like maybe the foot throttle's stuck and then auto idle takes over and brings it back down. So I'm not sure. It says, you just mentioned parts getting discontinued for Bobcat. Change parts to catalogs. I just looked again for parts from my backhoe attachment, and the diagram is nowhere to be found online. I saw it a few weeks prior. Thanks. I'm not aware of any diagrams going away. I could be wrong, but the actual, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I'd have to double check that. I'm not familiar. It seems like all the parts for everything I've ever looked at are there. So I don't know. Hopefully they're not pulling parts diagrams down for some of that older stuff. I don't know. Let's see. Aaron only has 90 hours on the machine. Wow. 90 hours. So it's a 2022, so it sounds like it sits a lot. 90, really? Wow. I'd love to put a computer on that and see some So you could do, like if you had our software, you could do a snapshot of it and send me a copy of that snapshot file, and we could go through some things and see what's kind of going on. Interesting. Yeah, that's what I was thinking. The injectors were leaking as it's hot, and since it's been only 90 hours in 2022, it sounds like it sits a lot, which would make sense why an injector would be sticking, not closing all the way and leaking fuel back into the combustion chamber. So when you start it up, it's burning off that extra fuel that leaked into the cylinder. That's kind of where I'm going with that, but yeah, no smoke because the 770, so the SCR is going to catch all that. You shouldn't see any smoke. Even if you had extra fuel in there, the SCR is going to catch all that smoke. You're not going to see it. So yeah, it could be a leaking injector. That's where we pull the injectors out and put on a tester on the test bench, pump them up to pressure and see if they hold. Yeah, that's my question. I don't know, is it full throttle or just high throttle, or yeah, I don't know. Does it settle back down? It just seems like there's more question of that. Hey, is the digital fuel pressure gauge available yet for Bobcat yet? The one you plug into the fuel rail pressure sensor harness. Yeah, we've got those available. They're on our website, and it's for the M series. It doesn't work for the R series, but it does work for all the M series excavators and skid steer Delphi fuel systems. So that's kind of handy too when you don't want to hook up your software. We got a digital gauge that you just tee in to the rail pressure sensor, and then that'll tell us if we're actually, it tells us what our rail pressure is with the digital. It was both digital and analog. It gives you both readings, so that it's really handy. And those, yeah, they're on our website, and they're available to buy. Is Bobcat going away from hand-foot controls? Not that I know of. I could be wrong. Some dealers, like in the area that I am, they just order all their machines SJC. But like a friend of mine in Texas, most of their machines come in hand-foot controls. So I'm not 100% sure if they're going away, because a lot of people request and order hand-foot controls. It just depends on part of the country you're in. So I would have to look into that. As far as I know, I'm not aware of them going away from hand-foot controls. He says, yeah, the RPMs just take off like crazy. It does sit quite a bit. Yeah, I'm thinking there's probably a leaky injector in that thing. But Pixlayer, my E45 dozer blade sometimes sags down when I raise it. When I lower it down, I pick up the E45 off the ground. The blade gets solid again and does sag. Any ideas? Yeah, usually when you start getting blade sagging issues like that, like sometimes it'll hold and sometimes it won't, it's usually in the swivel joint, the seals in the actual swivel in the center of the machine. That's usually where the problem is. I mean, you can chase, cylinder and stuff like that. Maybe it's a loose nut or a loose fitting on the cylinder. So if you rebuild the cylinder and everything looks good in the cylinder, next place it's probably going to be in the swivel. And the blades act like that. When you start getting a seal issue in the swivel, it's like sometimes it holds and sometimes it don't, and then we rebuild swivels and then the problem goes away. So usually it's in the swivel. That's going to be my best guess, assuming that there's nothing wrong with the cylinder itself. And turning it off and back on fixes that I would lean more towards an electrical issue maybe. Yeah, that's true. Maybe fire it up real quick, turn it off, and start it again and see what it does. It's interesting. Unplug battery, erase CCM, and try it. Yeah, unplugging the battery don't really clear the codes on these machines. They're pretty much stored in there in the chips. They don't have to have power to store the codes, so that doesn't work very well on the machines. And that's the problem. We go back to the DCU, is that you can't clear the codes by unplugging the DCU or taking off the battery. They're stuck in there. They're stored in there. You can leave the battery unhooked for 3 months. It doesn't matter. When you hook it back up, those codes are still going to be there. So that may or may not fix the issue as far as that goes. Man, I am caught up. I got all the way to the bottom, 2 hours, 8 minutes. Thanks everyone for being here and all those that stayed with us throughout the whole thing. Good to see you, Pig Slayer. Dan, thanks for all your help, man, all the valuable information. One of the best out there, along with Faux Nickel, and of course Mike. Looks like he left us a little bit ago, but it is late and he's got other family duties that he has to be to as well. So a lot of great questions. Man, thank y'all so much for, I just can't tell you enough how much I appreciate the donations and stuff that you guys sent. We really enjoy doing this. We really like being here, and we don't expect any of that, but we do really appreciate the support and being here and answering all these questions with us. A lot of fun, a lot of great questions. I got lost a few times without Mike. Hopefully we will have him with us next week, and we will see you guys.